Welcome to the Outrun Show. Today, we talk about serious topics like flips.
What are flips?
No, in all seriousness, welcome to today's show. We are going to be talking a lot about a pretty heavy topic about what is parkour and what is freerunning. What are the differences? Doesn't matter, and our opinions on the topic as a whole. We're going to start out, though, giving you our flip hacks. Now, all three of us are not huge free-running athletes or tricking athletes, so learning flips for us has always been a bit of a journey. You may be like us, in which case, tune in and listen to what our best flip hacks are for you getting those tricks.
Okay, you guys, welcome. And now we talk about flips. We know everybody loves flips. It doesn't matter who you are. You can say you don't. You can say that you're just all practicality and no fun. But the truth is, deep down, you want to flip. You look from the corners and peer at your peers wishing you were involved.
It only takes so many kids asking you to do a backflip before it just eats at your soul.
Before you're like, I need to learn how to do a backflip.
Maybe because I mostly train adults at this stage in my life, but I hear about wanting to flip from adults just as much, if not more, than kids. So, yeah, constantly. And it might be my single biggest point of feedback as to why people are dissatisfied with my programming.
I haven't gotten a flip yet.
Yes, I'm serious. And those of you listening who are my students and clients, I'm talking about you.
Ooh, call out.
That's a call out. So it's just little by little. So we want to make flips happen faster. What are our flip tips?
I want to start with safety is the 110% priority here when you're learning flips. I don't care what age you are. If you're young, you see kids huck front flips and they land on their butt or their heels or their head and they stand up, giggle, and then they go again. That's a kid thing. It happens when you weigh 60 pounds, you can throw yourself to the ground. When you weigh 3 times that, you can't just huck yourself into it. And flips are a skill. They're a neurological skill that requires a lot of repetition. And repetition on high impact things means that there's a chance that you could get hurt. So start slow.
Yeah.
I just gotta say.
But don't flip slow.
Don't flip slow. Never flip slow. Yeah. But I just want to say, if you're getting into flips, find somewhere that is extremely padded. And honestly, if you're that's not enough pads, cool. Throw more pads. I don't care if everybody in the gym looks at you and they're like, wow, that guy's using 3 crash mats to learn 1 backflip. Do it. Because if you land on your head 1 time as an adult, it will set you back so far on your progress of learning flips because you're just wired to avoid pain and injury.
The fear stuff is going to be really hard if you land on your head. It's going to be very hard to go backwards. Everybody who's learned a backflip, almost everybody I know, has at one time landed on their head.
Yes.
And for most of them, it's the reason why they don't practice backflips anymore. And once that happened to them, they had to go back through learning to get, even if that was just 1 or 2 sessions, to get back to doing something like a backflip. So you should take Jesse's advice very seriously. We worked with, and in the intro, we say, hey, we're not big free runners. By that, what we mean is we're not on Red Bull Art of Motion. This isn't our top athletic forte, but that doesn't mean we don't know what we're talking about for sure when it comes to flips. We can flip. We can throw down on some flips. And you should take Jesse seriously, but if you can't see what he looks like right now, you should look at the YouTube channel /Outrun Parkour episode 17, because I think the aesthetic he's got going on right now, it's pretty true to Outrun, but he kind of looks like a Kung Fury Mr. T turned Buddhist at this point.
Buddhist Mr. T.
a Buddhist Mr. T right now.
Take.
Right, exactly. I empathize with the fool, is what I'm thinking.
Flip faster.
So, Justin, what do you got like initial like open for the tip? Like what needs to be in your head?
I think when you're learning flips, you have to reduce impact as much as possible for as long as possible. Like, no flip should have hard impact. If you have a flip that you're learning it and you just feel it every time you land, then you're doing something wrong and you need to change something.
Agreed. I feel like most of the time when people want to flip, they just want to unlock it, right? They want to know what it's like to flip. And to flip is to be weightless. It's to feel like you are leaving sort of the rules of physics for a moment and then disappearing and reemerging without injury, right? I mean, that makes it very glorious. So there's one thing that it is to feel like when you're doing a flip, which is super empowering. And then there's the other feeling that it is to watch yourself doing a flip and then have other people see that, right? Mm-hmm. And the impression it leaves on people and inspiration or concern, whichever they feel watching you do it. And as you get older or younger, the risks go up. So I say there's two things. If you just want to see yourself do a flip, that's cool. Perhaps then the backflip might be the one that you go for because it's easily recognizable. There are variations of the backflip you can do that are probably less, in my opinion, maybe less dangerous and easier to obtain, like a wall flip, which is where you step on to a wall and run off backwards doing a backflip. For a lot of people, that's their first backwards rotating thing. It's also very easy to pad underneath that and get the momentum you need to get over. But if I was going to say, if you're going to feel like flipping, twisting and forward momentum for me tends to be really lower hanging fruit, like more attainable, right? So learning to do a front flip or a side flip for me has been a safer experience, and the idea of being able to carry some forward momentum into the flip, the run up is enjoyable, the rotation is enjoyable, opening up is enjoyable, landing is enjoyable, and those flips generally can be longer feeling. It's very risky to stall out in doing a backflip unless you're doing like a round off like layout or something like that, where you can kind of float a little bit more, or kick the moon is a good one, but which is where you have a single leg, an asymmetrical flip. The advice I have for people is to make sure that you're working with a coach who has experience on that, especially if you're older. If you're younger, sometimes kids get it in the trampoline park, but not without a price, and you heal better when you're younger, right?
Yep.
Yep.
And
your freshness guarantee is tighter.
If you don't have access to a coach, although pretty much everybody does, we're all available online, as are other coaches in other industries. So you can definitely find a coach, but if for whatever reason you're not able to, watch YouTube videos and then watch 3 more, right? So don't ever watch one tutorial on the flip that you're looking and stop there. Always watch a ton of videos. If you want, write down all of the drills that they set out and pick whichever one's the safest and start there. This is if you're training on your own, right? If you're working with a coach, your coach will probably have like a ton of progressions already set out and drills for you, which is great. But if you're working on your own, get like a whole book of drills for this one flip and start with the easiest and the safest one and work your way up once you feel like you got it.
So the hacks for learning your first, let's say, backflip, front flip, side flip, or hacks in general. Justin, what hacks you got?
I always tell people to try to keep their shoulders the same height when they're flipping. So whether it's a front flip or a back flip, you're standing, you got your shoulders up here and your hips are down here.
Below, right?
Yeah, hips below your shoulders when you're standing. Normally. Hopefully, yeah. That's how it is. But when you do your flip, your shoulders actually stay locked in that position, and your hips
rotating around.
Orbit around your shoulders, and that's the easiest way that you land and you take off in the same position. If you drop your shoulders and you flip your hips over, you usually hit the ground a lot harder. You're flipping into the ground. You're like tumbling. But if you can lock your shoulders and you can get your front flip where your hips jump backwards, or your back flip where your hips go forward, and you can leave your shoulders in place, flips are so much easier.
And I like that you use the word orbits, because that is the name of our shameless plug for the name of our acrobatic free running focused and sort of and tricking focused fundamentals. And we use that term orbit and not like I think what you're saying is like tomahawking when you're talking about like throwing forward.
Yeah, where you have two things that are moving, right?
Yes.
In relation to the ground, I feel like really one is locked into relationship with the ground and the other is.
Yeah, so like orbiting over tomahawking, where you're moving around the center of gravity, versus like if you've seen ski fails or something off jumps where people catch toe and spin 8 times only to like
tomahawk down.
That's a good one.
Double tomahawk.
That's a lot of front
flips should not be like that.
Busted jaw, right? Exactly. Also, knowing where you are in space. This is sort of proprioception and also the development of the vestibular system, which we talked about on earlier episodes. But you have to be a master of your vestibular system, because I will say that, you know, all the flips that I can land consistently, I always feel like eyes open, eyes closed, I know where I am. Like the mind's ability to essentially slow time in experience and give you a sense of where the ground is a real thing. And so if you're thinking, I'm just going to jump really hard, tuck, and something's going to happen, I'm going to merge on the other side, this is really how people flip. No, it's like that. You have to have enough.
It's like that.
It is. It's freaking like that, right? Like, if you're listening right now, imagine doing a flip. See how curious you are, and like your brain like turns off when you go upside down and flip backwards, and you can't keep track of where you are. You're not even doing the flip. You can't keep track of where you are. If you can, then you know, at least you can sort of feel what that's like. Yeah, so you've got to start getting over backwards or forwards or whatever rotation that you're going after.
A lot, yeah. Whether that's like, you know, if you're doing forward rotations, doing handstands or somersaults on the ground, right? That would fall in the progression. But getting used to that motion of inverting and going all the way through the motion, that modality matters, right?
Yeah.
And that's like step one.
Step one.
Get your brain used to what's going to happen, right?
Get your brain used to going over backwards. Exactly.
Yeah. So, but yeah, most flips are, when you're learning them, they are taught incorrectly in my opinion, in that they're taught like, here's the setup and what we call the set, and here's the takeoff, and here's the shape, and here's what the tuck looks like. And it's like, launch, close your eyes and hold that shape and hope that you come out on the other side correctly, right? And it's like, if we put in all the data on the front end correctly and then we run the formula, you're supposed to have a flip on the other side.
Yes.
But what happens in the middle does matter, right? And that's the difference between somebody who's really good at doing these acrobatic skills, is they look at the whole movement. They're not just like, for a backflip, I jump up and I tuck and I wish.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In the entire movement, you can see them doing stuff, right? Whether that's pulling into a tighter tuck the entire time, or pulling into a really tuck and then opening up early, whatever it is. But it's not a throw things and hope they make it out on the other side. And if that's your approach to a flip, then that's risky. I wouldn't say it's wrong, but it is risky.
And also you have to look at your degree of athleticism. If you're a power athlete, already highly athletic, you can jump real high. If you have those feelings, there are certain flips that probably you can go after earlier. And then if you're someone who just feels like you don't generate a lot of power, and you're not super strong and athletic, but you're in shape and you want to work on a flip, what are the 2 flips that either person could unlock first?
I'd say if you're already a power athlete, a backflip's a good one. I say if you can't tuck jump past like your belly button, backflip's out for you right now. Like, you need to work on like box jumps and vertical jumps, because there is a certain height element that you should have just for safety, right?
Something like that.
Yeah, you could do that, but then again, like, a round off's a lot of force, you know. So I just wouldn't recommend that for somebody who doesn't have that prerequisite. But the flip that requires, and we've done, you know, force plate tests on it, or at least I have, is the side flip. It requires the least amount of force onto the ground in order for you to complete the flip. Backflip's actually a lot of power to do that, right? Because you have to get your entire body up. But on a side flip, you're really just kind of, you're doing what my cat
rolling
does.
over yourself.
You're rolling,
yeah.
Right? You're just kind of falling and then doing 180 rather than a full like 360. So.
And I actually do the side flip in many ways similar to a kick.
Yeah. And the side flips actually, if done really well, I think is cooler than a backflip. Because you have momentum going in and momentum going out, which means you can do all sorts of cool stuff with it.
You can connect way more things.
So if you're a low power athlete right now, just check out tutorials on the side flip, and you and a friend can do it because you can roll over your friend's back. It requires the least amount of setup. You get the opportunity to watch the ground pretty much 3/4 of the movement. And the bail is really easy because you're already sideways, so if you fall, you just kind of do a little barrel roll and you're fine. Whereas a backflip, you have head risks.
Right. I think on the Instagram story we took, one of our b-boy coaches, Izzy, shout out to Izzy, and who's already a pretty athletic guy. Mm-hmm. He's not like a college athlete or something like track athlete, like you're imagining somebody who, is going to end up in like some NFL draft or something like that. But he's like a b-boy. He's a real good mover. He's a strong guy. I think we did on a live, and I did an Instagram live, and I'm like, I'm going to teach him a side flip in 15 minutes. And I think we did it in 10. He landed his first side flip in 10. So if you're reasonably, if you have a decent coach and you're reasonably athletic, you can get that one fast. And it wasn't scary for me. Oftentimes I judge coaching by how afraid I am for my students because I have a real good intuition about the early signs of failure.
Yeah.
And so if I don't have that feeling of like, anxiety on the inside, I think I remember one time, Jesse, I'm nearly never afraid for Jesse or Justin. Like, I can remember that being put to the test when you were on the bar set in like the 7.5 foot bar set in the gym, and I can't remember what goofdom you were engaged in the middle of it, right? What debauchery of swinging was happening there. But you're swinging on the bar and you decided like that you were gonna do a giant to a lache release, and you got like one giant around, or then you went for the second one, maybe it was a baby giant. And then you're like, I can't remember I think your hand slipped or something, and you were completely upside down, and I saw you, and everybody's just like, oh my gosh, this is where he dies. And then I think you just did like a negative handstand push up and just like kind of, fell right into it, like forward and swung a little bit, like. And
the top part of the giant and my.
Yes, exactly. And I think you just fell forward and just like re-grabbed and just sort of like dopily swung back and forward, and then finished your lache with a little bit of like, I don't know, you might have blushed from the embarrassment or something at that moment, but that was the worst of it, right? Was blushing, right? And I saw you do that, and I wasn't. Like, my heart didn't skip a beat. So, like, there, that seems like a goofy butt up there. Okay, all right, yeah, that's a good way to handle that. Like, that's how I felt. But everybody else is like, right? Now, I've had other students, like, wind up for a box jump 2 feet off the ground, and I'm about to pass out from fear. Okay? And that's just because you start to read the body and people's awareness, and it's like when you're watching your cat jump from, like, the counter to the cupboard, you know which one's going to make it.
Yep.
Right? And if you've got not one cat that you're like, he's like, you don't train that much anymore, then you're worried for him. But the new one that you got that's 6 months old and can make it, across the entire kitchen, you're just like, don't scratch the countertop.
It's usually the 6-month ones that miss.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I've been watching my cats enough.
Yeah, I always get that feeling when you see a kid and he's eyeing the bar and he's like doing that little like
butt wiggle.
Yep.
Yeah.
They do the little
jump forward. You're like,
just like a kitten.
The pre-jump butt wiggle is not a professional technique. Like,
it's not, but professional athletes will do it. If you train outside, you'll see athletes. Yeah. Except it looks more like this.
Yeah.
Wipe their feet. They stand and they're like.
And it looks more like a settle.
And then literally like in 20 seconds later, they're
back doing it again.
And in which case, like, we've always recommended when we're training with athletes, like, if that's you, if you have those nervous tics, I mean, again, I really like my life, so I don't want to, like, shatter a leg and my life have to change. So I am pretty risk adverse. You might not be. But for me, I'd be like, okay, I've got these nervous tics, I'm not ready for this. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go do something else, right? Life's just too short to be, like, risking it on those kinds of things. But if you're out there to push the boundaries, maybe that's for you, but if it were my student, I'd be like, yo, let's come back to it on another day. Because if you're wiping your feet 3 times and you haven't moved yet, you're way nervous. You're focused on the wrong thing.
It's this right combination with any flip where, now people do break mental barriers by psyching themselves up and then doing it, okay? Mm-hmm. My first, I think it was round off backflip. I had never done before. I'd done standing back tuck, but I had not. I wasn't trained really well on. This is a kind of embarrassing, but also relatable story. I was trained on backflip because I was doing them standing, and then I had done round offs, and I was like, oh, I bet I can do round off backflip, and I was too afraid. Well, then a couple sessions later or something, I'd gotten a hold of a Spider-Man costume.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember your Spider-Man costume.
That was a legit Spider-Man costume.
There was legit Spider-Man costume. That's sold on eBay for like $350.
Dang.
Yeah, I made a killing on that Spider-Man costume. Anyway, that was back before it was like, it was hard to get good-looking Spider-Man costumes at that time.
That's true.
I threw on that Spider-Man costume for the first time, and for some reason, I thought I was Spider-Man. Like, I was pretty sure I could do anything. And I hadn't even intended to do round off back tuck, but I threw it on and just ran out in front of my buddies and just threw round off, a backflip, right? And no one had seen it done with our peer group before in that time, so that was a big deal. And I think that had something to do with just believing and letting the spontaneity of it emerge. And I think that's the more natural way to get those personal records or the personal bests or breakthrough, instead of getting in there and having a bunch of your friends yell at you, "It's all you, bro," and then do it, you got it. Like, you don't know, you think you're being encouraging, but you're not psychic, you can't see in their head, and then someone may try it just to impress or prove or feel because they feel obligated. Like, it's this right combination of being fit enough and wanting to do it and being ready, and that moment's gonna feel good, and if it doesn't, I think it's forced. So that's one of my tips. The other tip on, okay, go ahead. Do you guys have an opinion on that, or should it be psych somebody up and get them to do a flip?
No.
I usually don't like psyching people up. Yeah.
I've never wanted to. I don't want to be responsible for somebody else.
Yeah.
I think people think they're being encouraging.
Yeah. And for some people that works.
Yeah.
Again, like when we talked about the friend group thing.
Yeah.
Your friend group's going to have its unique culture. Maybe that's part of the culture. But even if it's part of the culture now, you should still be like, is it actually? And look at that and determine that. It may actually be that way, but it may not be, right? Like I said, every friend group has an introvert. You just might not recognize them yet, in which case you're not that good of friends yet.
So if Jesse's done Giants before, which is a full swing around the bar. Okay, so if Jesse's done Giants and he's trying to do a giant and then stick a lache afterwards, which is a tremendous amount of force and momentum, forward throwing, landing on something from a swing after swinging around the bar once, right? And I've seen him do similar work before, and I know that there's no new technique, and I'm like, oh, you got this, man, I believe in you, or something like that, and I'm psyching him up that way with something I know he can do. I think that might be the exception.
Yeah.
But
if there's a history of successful.
If there's a history of success.
Yeah, I feel like if it's more technical, like it's a combo, and you know all of the moves in the line have been done before, but putting them together is the hard part, then I feel like it makes more sense to hype someone up. But if it's a brand new move, I'd rather the confidence be built, because it's hard to replicate that hype every single time you want to learn a move. And if you're relying on the hype to get the move, it just feels like you can lose it when you lose the hype.
Or when you're not around friends.
Yeah.
Right? How do you get your own hype to break your own barriers if you don't have a friend group that's like, you don't have your woo guys, you know?
You're hype dependent.
Woo! Yeah. Hype dependent.
Hyper dependent.
Yeah, it's too hard to replicate, and the confidence and progressions are easier things to rely on.
Okay, best hack for, let's just say, learning a backflip before we move on.
It's literally my personal thing is learn a cartwheel and figure out how a cartwheel can turn into a backflip. If you have it's like how a human evolves from a monkey or from whatever to how we are now. You need intermediate fossils. You need a step from cartwheel all the way to backflip, and then if you screw up your backflip, you have all these little steps to fall back on and to get
plateaus.
To get to get back to your backflip. But if you have a cartwheel and you have a backflip, you have nothing in between, which is back handspring in the middle there. You go all the way back and you just lose so much progress. So that's my backflip tip.
So plan your evolutionary line.
Yes.
Yeah, you're looking for the Australopithecus. Just to make sure that it goes down. I went to a school that didn't teach evolution.
They did, just cursory.
Okay, there we go. All right.
My tip is keep your back straight. the like number one reason that you suitcase in a backflip is because you bring your chest forward, and really the backflip is you jump straight up and then you bring your knees to your chest.
Yeah.
So most newbies, they jump up and they bring chest and knees together, and those are counteracting forces on the
so
circle.
they fold in front of each other.
And so then you suitcase in the air and you just fall straight back down. So keep your chest up. If anything, feel free to like open the chest up a little bit, puff up. So meaning like breathe into the sternum and open it up, and bring your knees to your chest, because that's what's going to initiate the backwards rotation.
That's a big one. And you won't know you're doing that unless you film yourself.
Yes.
You won't notice when you go down into to prep your backflip that your chest drops just a little too much. So
the other thing I've seen, so there, what we're talking about is there's the frontal plane, and if all of the flexion and extension remains on that frontal plane, then you're essentially just jumping up in the air and doing an advanced tuck jump that ends up with you on your head. I've seen the other problem though too, where like if there's if you focus on, sometimes if we hear the cue, keep your back straight, then we think like don't rotate, right? So I've seen people also like have a really straight back and then jump up and then just do nothing with backwards rotation and pull their chest and sort of drift upside down too.
Yeah, I mean that would.
How would you correct that?
that's going to be the same problem with the shoulders and the hips. If you're jumping and your shoulders go up too high, your hips are never going to get above.
So that's great because both shoulder and hip were traveling equidistant to each other and vertical without pinning sort of like the relative position of the shoulder in the flip and letting the hip travel across the frontal plane, up and over and backwards, with using the straight back for extension, right? That's a cue for.
I cue that there's a fish hook hooked right up underneath your sternum, and when you go for your takeoff, it's very Native American.
Like this, there's a little
in
tribal
rights. But when you jump up in the air, imagine there's somebody standing above on the roof, and they pull straight up. So when you lift, you're not lifting from the crown of the head necessarily, but you're lifting from here.
From the sternum.
Right? And that doesn't mean that I lay down. It means that I jump straight up, but my chest lifts. And that gives me this ever so slightly backed arch if you're watching the YouTube video, where my chest is back. I'm not leaning back, but I'm opening up enough that gives me backwards initiation.
So
and that's not necessary for the backflip, but it is helpful.
I think that those are really good tips. I'm going to throw my little spice on that and then we'll move on. And that is that one of the things that the easiest cues that do sometimes make me look like a super coach that you can pretty much just walk around and just tell people you see doing backflips and their backflip will look better, is that sometimes they get in their head too much about the flip. And this is for someone who sort of has a backflip, but it's a little like not inconsistent, but the rotation. Yeah, let's just say they're maybe 2 steps beyond huck and hope into they huck, but they always land in QM, right? They always land on like all fours, or they land just short. Not the ones who are landing on their knees on the mats. That's just a no-no. You got to go fix other stuff there. And that is to cue standing on the balls of your feet slightly, and then active abs. And that doesn't mean flex and squeeze the abs like you're going to do a sit-up or like you're pulling in that motion, but just be mindful enough, like as if I was going to touch Justin's abs and cue him and make him like I was not like punch, but just like that gets that midline actually involved. And then I see a lot of people who are doing that issues with rotation that are basically heel jumping, right? Like they're not even engaging the ball of foot in an athletic manner. They're just jumping flat-footed straight up and then relaxing the abs too much when they're the midline too much is there. They send their chest over to do the flip, and then it's like they're like a slinky, like they're the slinky dog, right? They're from Toy Story. What's his name?
I don't know.
Slinky dog. Let's call him that. You get the idea. They flip over and then they're like, "Oh, where's the rest of my body?" And then it comes over. So that keeps them moving as one piece and keeps them moving more athletic and gets that nice position. So I'm like, yeah, stand on the balls of your feet, do the flip, active abs. Like I'm gonna touch your ab and you don't want to be tickled. Basically, is what I said.
Cool. Good tips.
There's some tips.
Hopefully that helps you guys on your journey to
don't take
flip you're learning.
Yeah, don't if you're on your journey, use these tips. And then also don't just take this as enough advice for trying your first backflip, please.
More info, always more info.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about a quick thing that helps you if you're a parkour athlete or a free running athlete, and people say, well, I thought it was free running, or I do parkour, or I do free running, and these exchanges of terminology, there's forever been an argument about what to call what we do, and so we're going to talk a little bit about how to most appropriately, use those definitions. And I'm reminded of an early story, which I thought that this was, you guys were like, oh, this used to be an argument on the old parkour forums back before, Facebook and stuff was a thing.
Forums?
Yeah.
These APK forums, people fighting about it's parkour, it's free running.
Since the topic's getting serious, I'm gonna
take the glasses off.
I'll keep the beads on though because they're centering to me.
It's grounding. It's grounding and centering. Justin and I were getting gear for, I think, the first build in Loveland at the Home Depot. We walk in and this cashier he's an older gentleman. As I approach probably his age, I shouldn't say that, but he was an older gentleman, and he's like, what are you guys getting that for? What are you getting all this wood for, or whatever? He's like, you guys building something, a project? And Justin's like, oh yeah. We gotta build a gym. It's called Parkour. We got a parkour gym. And just this random Home Depot, like older, like dad, I think he might even had a dad hat on or something. It's just like, yeah, I liked it better when they call it free running. And I was like, what? Like usually you had to expect, then you still had to explain what parkour even was. But this guy is somebody's dad cashier at Home Depot who had an opinion, and that's why it just stuck out to me. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Like, does this guy know? Or anyway, yep, that. And he was like, I like it better when they call it free running. And I was happy.
We probably just heard people comment on it for so many years that like they just.
Yeah, I think I was half happy that the Home Depot employee knew, and half offended that he thought he was like, I'm gonna tell you guys what you do. So, yeah, parkour versus free running. Where does the debate start?
So if we're not talking about history, although that has its own thing, we're talking the differences lie in their definitions and the reason for the practice, right? So free running is the more aesthetically expressive side of parkour skills plus whatever else you want to add to it. Right? It's all about moving through your environment in your way that you feel represents you the best, or whatever it is that you're going for, right? Whereas parkour is traditionally more practical and utilitarian. It's about training for being the best in any given environment to get to a certain spot or get away from a certain thing, right? So it's like the mindsets are different. In practice, yeah.
We tend to see the speed and skill domains of parkour falling closer with being more rarely called free running, right? I think it might be easier to make this argument if we say, hey, if I do a speed course, is that free running? The only scenario where you might see that overlap is there is some regionality to terminology. For example, Tempest is Tempest free running. Mm-hmm. They're in LA, and that because people go to a free running gym, they might be more inclined to call all the things they do parkour free running, and that's not okay. It's just you typically are going to hear people say free running is looks like parkour. It is parkour, but it has an aesthetic emphasis and a creative emphasis.
Yep.
Right. And then parkour, as a more global term and at its core, is focused potentially more on the skill and speed segments of the movements than doing a flip, right? Even though early, so the word parkour comes from what, Jesse? Do you want to give us that? So you guys don't know, Jesse actually has spent time in France. Jesse speaks French. And according to 23andMe...
Oh. Wait.
What? No, 23andMe didn't show me any
kind of French.
No
I just want to call that out. Yeah.
No, I'm not French. But the term parkour comes from the French, essentially the phrase or word for obstacle course, which is parcours du combattant, or combattant. Essentially Parcours, S is silent, And the parkour with a K is kind of a slang way.
It's colloquialism.
C with a K. Yeah, it's colloquial. It's like cooler. It's edgier.
And we really see parkour the way we use the term derived from that, right?
Yeah. So the obstacle course training was implemented in like the French military and like your World War II era, and then through like Vietnam. And so then what happens is we take that sort of style of training, and David Bell, which we've all heard of and we all know the name.
You may not. You may have.
You may not, in which case you can look him up. But his father was in the military and trained that way, and then he just called it parkour, right? So instead of using the whole obstacle course word, he called it parkour. And David Bell saw that from his dad and was like, okay, cool. Like, that's how I want to train and live my life too. And he trained it not being a military guy or having any sort of like military experience, but just trained it as a lifestyle, essentially to be fit, to be useful, right?
And this is circa 1980.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so he's training it, and then when he moves to Nice, in France, he meets other people that also have a similar interest in training this way. And that's where we have the like birth of the Yamakasi, which are like our OG parkour people.
Yes.
And they had kind of a different term for it at the time, which was l'art du déplacement, which is essentially the art of movement. And so that's what their kind of like colloquial fun name for it, because they didn't want to take it as serious. Then you see when they start doing shows, because parkour is very flashy, it's very cool to look at, it's fun to watch. You have people like wanting them to do exhibition shows and demonstration and film videos. And at that time is where you see the split between like parkour as a training methodology and free running as a way to train parkour, but just for your own enjoyment, for your creative output.
Right.
And then the Yamakasi had kind of like their internal split, and I have not like ever had like a deep conversation with any of them about this, so is what it is. I won't like inject on what exactly happened there. But as far as what we know, and from what Julie Angel in her book has written, they had some sort of internal split around how they felt like what represented what they do best. And so then we have the split, between like Sebastian Foucault, who's saying that it's expressive and it's called free running, and David Bell, who's seems to be a little bit more hardcore, and is like, no, it's a training lifestyle. Like, you train to be useful, right? And Sebastian's more like, I just want to have fun, which is cool. Both are like their thing.
But Yamakasi seem to have more of like a martial arts influence.
They were definitely like the old Chinese like guy where it was like, we're going to train for like a couple of days and not eat.
And crawl forever.
And like crawl through the city. And just like these grueling, brutal things.
Because a lot of stuff
it's like early CrossFit without weights.
Yeah. Okay. Early CrossFit without weights. Yup. I mean, that country, I think early CrossFit was definitely in a bunch of pole buildings or sheet metal buildings in the middle of nowhere throwing Olympic weights around, like, inspired by YouTube. What I think is interesting here is that what we see is like sort of the nature of their influence, hits them, and that affects their definitions. And that's going to be true for anyone who's training, right? They're going to take their early inspirations and then they're going to try and incorporate that. And I just see that as flavor. I see that as an opportunity. Even the shift in where the origin of the word parkour comes from, it's still bringing a little bit of character more into the meaning. And then we see layers of that happening again and again. But a lot of these guys were either inspired by their family, who were involved in practical military training, trying to be useful. Yep, firefighting. Method Naturale, which is that lineage, right? The George Hebert, right? Lineage, and in that sort of pushing up into David Bell's experiences, and then we get into the Yamakasi, which these guys and all these guys had overlap. There's a Venn diagram here for sure. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had these type relationships, where inspiration is coming from comics and kung fu movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's really this is really the inspiration of what you wanted as a child to grow up like, but drawn into like an adult domain, in the sense that it's taken so much more seriously, right? I mean, all of us tend to have this as a kid where you're jumping around on stuff and you're like, oh, I was doing parkour, and somewhere in there you turn from like this little lion cub into a lion, right? And all of these disciplines, parkour, free running, method natural, these sort of things, all are sort of the adult manifestations of what your intuitions are as a kid. So that definitely has a relationship, and that makes them different than game shows. I just want to call that out while we're at this juncture, okay?
We'll address that.
We'll address that. So it definitely is. It makes them more like martial arts, more like inspired by comics and kung fu movies and whatnot. So we have those, and then we have free running. We see free running emerge. So David Bell is accredited with the word parkour. Sometime in the 80s.
In the modern interpretation of parkour is credited to David Bell.
And Sebastian Foucault is credited with the term free running, which derived when they did, was it Jump London? That
it's in Jump London that he specifically recalled. All right, yeah,
because I think there was dialogue about whether people would receive parkour as you marketed it or put it on TV. It was a French word. There was what word can we use, and I think that's where free running emerges. Is Sebastian
definitely more of like a Western term for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So they go
despite France being considered in the West.
Yeah, yeah. Despite that, right? So they're worried about catering to an English audience, in the UK audience for the show, and so they go with free running. It sticks, and it maybe is something that Sebastian feels like is good to the nature.
So that's the history.
Yeah, you need a little bit of background to know that. Now,
and I just want to preface that like none of us lived that. We've been in the industry for a very long time, but
you've crawled around in France, right?
Oh yeah.
All right. Yeah. I've met Sebastian, so.
Yeah, I'm just saying like there's a lot of like hearsay around the history of parkour and free running, and I'm sure depending on who you talk to, you might hear tweaks of that story. I'm not a historian. I'm just, I try to be the best coach I can be. So like that's my knowledge of the history. I would do your own research. Julie Angel has a fantastic book.
We were going to do Parkour Book Club.
Do you have it actually?
I do. Yeah, I can hold it up.
It's called Breaking the Jump.
Breaking the Jump.
It's pretty good. I would recommend reading it if you're interested, and if you're not interested in history... If you really
want to know the history of parkour, you can... Yeah, there's early stories.
Good. It's really good. She does a really great job of like digging in and interviewing people. So, and I'm probably not doing the book justice on all of the history.
It's okay. We'll do Parkour Book Club and talk about the intricacies. But there's a lot...
Book Club later.
There's a lot in here of just interactions between these people are considered the founders, basically the Yamakasi, Sebastian Foucault, and David Bell are what in parkour is generally considered the founders, right? Now that's changed. It's spread out. Even so far, I just want to make note that there is even a Chinese word for parkour that has some intention behind it. We put it in some of our signage, and in Chinese, if you look for the translation of parkour, it is Parkour. And so Parkour is how Chinese translates parkour. It literally means run cool.
Sick.
So they took the word run, which is pao, which sounds a lot like par, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how translation's done in Chinese. It's not, they don't try to get as close to the phonetics. They try and get to a meaning that resembles the phonetics, but still sounds good to the Chinese language speaker's ear, which I think is kind of cool, but makes it very difficult to understand across languages. So pao means to run, and then the ku is a word in Chinese that reads ku, but is the Chinese translation of the word, the English word cool. So let me rewind that real quick.
So
if I said, how do I say cool in Chinese? They'd say cool. You say, oh, han cool, very cool. Or kupila, which means like extremely cool. It's just like rad. Like kupila would be like rad, right? So it basically means rad running. I think that's the way I translate it. Sounds like
that's another name we could have done.
Is rad run? Rad run instead of outrun.
That sounds like we have like a radiated gym.
No, I think that rad run might be our maybe a new comp name or something. So
you sounds like a mobile game where you run away from a radiation explosion.
Yes, you do the rad run.
Anyways, let's dig into the opinion now now that we've stated the historical
Yeah, you understand
facts,
the context, you understand where it started, where it is, and where it could be, right? With Chinese language even taking it further on translation.
Yeah, and let's go with opinions. Let's dig in. Justin, what are your feelings on the differences?
If you could tell by this conversation, I don't have a lot of energy for this conversation.
Oh, you always look a little sleepy on the podcast. You guys,
Yeah.
it's not that he doesn't want to be here if you watch the YouTube video. He's a sleepy cat.
He's a sleepy boy.
Yeah.
I need time to collect my thoughts.
Okay.
Except in this
Contemplative.
particular topic, I have a hard time like formulating any sort of strong emotion for it.
Why don't you think it
besides-
matters?
I just don't. I've just grown up with this argument in YouTube comments for a decade, and it just seems so worthless for anyone to have an argument among strangers for it. So, and it feels like it's not going to change the way you train. You're going to train the way you want it to, whether you think you're doing free running or parkour. And we all know parkour is the cooler word, so let's just use it.
Wait, that. Oh my god!
So-
I totally see what you did there.
That's definitely
That's a bait and switch, sir.
Yeah, that is. So, I think where it arises, and you tell me if you have an answer to this, is that people often want a definition that reflects themselves when they say, I'm doing this, right? So, like, this is maybe a bad example, but like skateboarding is very obvious. You're skating on a board, right? But if somebody just called it like wheel riding, they might not like it because it doesn't reflect the culture of what they do, right?
Yeah.
So what would you say to somebody who's like, well, I feel like free running represents more the culture of what I'm doing, and that matters to me, because everybody wants a definition for their thing, right? Everybody wants to feel included in their community.
Yeah.
So do you think that it matters in that regard?
I have a hard time thinking it does, yeah.
So this is really tough because if anyone's a free runner of the three of us,
It's me.
It's just
Yeah.
it's you.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been paid to do it. You've been on gigs. You've been really everything
he's
short of
competed in
going
the-
to Art of
the-
Motion. You've lived the free running life.
Yeah, performances, which I feel like is a lot of free running and a lot of video and yeah.
And you did the Red Bull, the We Run the Streets, Nanigans. You did your if you look at your Instagram and your videos, they're all gonna look like most people would look at it and say, this guy's free running.
Yeah. And I don't do sweet comps. So yeah, I don't know. It's such a tough one. It feels like to me like when I see people trying to decide what they're doing and if this is considered parkour, if this is considered free running, it just feels like me watching like Batman versus Superman, and I'm just like, they're both good guys, and there's gonna be some bad someone who shows up at the end. They're gonna join forces anyways. So why do we spend an hour beating each other up about it?
I love that you use that analogy because that helps me explain my opinion, which is use it when it's to your advantage. You know, if I showed up on the set of Art of Motion, I'm gonna say free running. Like I'm gonna be using the word free running. And like people will be like, how long have you been doing it? They're like, oh man, like yeah, free running, it's what we do. Right? Because that's the language that's being used there. If I went to, Tempest, I would become more comfortable saying parkour, but if someone approached me and they were like, how long have you been free running? I would give them the same answer as if they said, how long have you been doing parkour? If I'm out just on my own accord, I'm going to use parkour because I think that globally that term has won out as far as brand recognition, name recognition, authenticity to the origin of the discipline. I think that has run out on a more global scale. And if anything, in China now, more people may know parkour by Parkour than a lot of people even
Is
in
there
America.
a name for free running?
No, there is no name for free running. There is no translation.
Settles it.
So there you go. A billion people don't even know the term.
Yep. So the Chinese are the tiebreaker. That's the deal.
So kind of what I'm getting from both of you is that it doesn't matter. Split them if you want.
Yeah.
Like use different terms if you want. Travis is definitely more
Pragmatist, maybe?
pragmatic around it, and that like use it when it fits.
Mhm.
Justin's more like it doesn't matter. Just don't beat other people up if you have a difference on like what somebody says. Somebody says I'm doing parkour, but they do a flip. Don't be like, well, actually.
Oh, that guy.
That guy who doesn't even do parkour.
Don't be the comic shop owner.
Oh yeah, for
you
sure.
can see in episode of Art of Motion that the freerunning is the official.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy. Don't talk like that.
I haven't run into anyone like that in a while. I feel like maybe if I go through some YouTube comments, I'll find it again. But...
Oh yeah, you can find it
still
on
there?
Reddit still.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Archives.
So
what's your deal? I mean, I have a couple more.
What's your deal?
What's your deal?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this topic because I when I see somebody doing parkour, I feel a connection to them automatically. Where I'm like, that's my people right there, right? And then when they're like, actually I do free running, I'm like, well, that term sounds kind of dumb. But opinions aside, because that is just my opinion, right? And there are some free runners out there that are super cool and do way cooler stuff than me. But it just doesn't make sense. Like when we break it apart into its definitions, like someone's like, well, parkour is more about like training intention and free running's about expression. I'm like, okay, so if I do this stride line with a lache and I post it on my Instagram and I'm like, this was a hard line for me, but it really represents how I train, and is that not expression?
Mm-hmm.
That's the definition of an expression. So then, is that free running or is that parkour? That one line. And they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe in that one line because your intention was aesthetic and expressive, creative, that one line's free running. I'm like, okay, well, we can't do that. I can't go through everybody's line and be like, hey, Travis, so in your video, was that expressive or was that pragmatic?
Right.
And then you message me back, right? We can't delineate that because that's now a philosophical debate. So maybe we go into moves. The other thing is like somebody's, moves now. Whether a move is efficient and practical or creative and expressive, right? But you don't know. If a lineman, from behind me decides to like run up behind me and try and like take me out at the knees and I happen to throw a backflip, that's a pretty pragmatic thing to do there instead of getting laid out by a 300-pound lineman, right? So that's a pragmatic move or a use of that move that wasn't expressive, but it technically is a free running move.
Mm-hmm.
So now am I doing parkour, am I doing free running? So we can dice it up all these different ways, but ultimately both moves in both fields do the exact same thing. You can do a free running line and it can be pragmatic depending on the context, or you can do a parkour line and it can be expressive based on your intention. So ultimately, they're the same thing, right?
Yeah.
We all do
That's
the
how I
same thing, and it really only hurts us when people who like gymnastics, like the FIG, or NBC or Fox, sees that we have different definitions. They're like, oh, cool. Well, they don't even know what they do. So let's just take it, right?
This isn't brandable. It's not packageable.
It's not brandable, yeah.
And I want to say that because there's nothing wrong with branding. I think people feel like when it's inauthentic, and the authenticity is comes from the origin story, and it comes from the people involved, and it comes from the intention. And by that lens, both are acceptable. I think they can be used interchangeably. They obviously are being used interchangeably, and we can try to force our opinions on it, but we're at a scale with this thing that it's like it's not going to matter. You need to know both opinions. I think that the use of the term tends to be more tied to the origin of your discipline's like lineage, meaning like who were your coaches? Who were they? Are they branded as free runners or are they branded as parkour athletes? Is your gym branded as a free running gym or is it branded as a parkour gym? And then that's going to have the biggest influence on what language you prefer to use. But I'm with you in that if people I just don't see that anymore as much either. Maybe there was at one point, but I don't see like people being over there like, oh, that's a free runner and that's a parkour guy, right? Like you don't see people pushing each other apart like that anymore.
That seriously, that like they feel they really need to defend that, like, no, I never do movements that are pragmatic.
That being said, oftentimes, and I think this is cool if anybody who's known us for a long time, real quick, I want to give some insight as to our early struggle with this. Because there was a time where it was controversial to post a video of someone doing a speed course, like for time, and calling that a parkour competition. Like, there was time where there was controversy around treating speed comps as parkour. Which is why when Amos dropped his video, he had to call it one of the early Apex videos that Amos did with a compilation of his speed runs, had to call it obstacle course, like, what was it? It was like parkour obstacle, like racing. I don't know. He didn't even, like, he was very sensitive to the term because there was people even commenting on that. You can find the video. We'll go back and link it out. But there are people trolling him for, like, parkour isn't about running, for speed, for competition. Right. There was concern about the use of competition.
I totally forgot.
Do you remember that?
The competition debate.
Now that's just gone. So again, it's like some of these things where it's like, you just kind of have to adapt, and your opinion may become irrelevant based off of a critical mass of someone just doing whatever they want, like calling things Parkour in China. You don't have any control over that, and most people in parkour don't even know that that's happened, and yet half the people by numbers potentially doing parkour are calling it that, right? So we're not having the free running parkour debate, even though I'm be fine calling it parkour. I think it's kind of cool.
I mean, it really just it sounds to me the same as parkour.
Yeah, it does. It's
just with a Mandarin, dialect
flip on it, right? Yeah. Exactly. The dialect shift. We knew that this was a problem, and in order to avoid this, using some Art of War strategy, we programmatically split our programs into Terra and Orbit and named the programs, not the disciplines. So we named the curriculum the Terra curriculum, and we named the Orbit curriculum, and then put different things into that category. You'll find what you might consider more traditional skill and speed parkour in the Terra curriculum, and in our Orbit curriculum you would find things that would be involved in, like there are parkour fundamentals in there for some jumps and things, but primarily it would be what you would brand as free running.
Yep.
And some tricking in there as well as other martial arts fundamentals at some level. And it is more of an emphasis on style. So style, free running, tricking. If someone comes into the gym and they're like, I've been watching this guy and they're a free runner and I'm interested in learning these flips and this style, then I'm going to say, you should start with Orbit, or you should work into Orbit because that program focuses more on those skills. Now if someone comes in, they say, I've been watching a lot of obstacle course shows. I have an interest in doing things that are practical and just learn to be athletic and jump. Then I'm like, you should lean Terra curriculum. In the back of my mind, I'm filtering that and basically listening for cues that are like, are they more David Bell or are they more Sebastian Foucan in some ways? And then saying this is the direction I think you should go. That being said, I wish that through this conversation we can preserve some of that history, and hopefully if you're new, if you're listening, you're like, oh wow, I didn't know that was where stuff came from. I thought this was all birthed out of Ninja Warrior. I mean, I don't know. So if you had that perception,
let's hope not.
And you're like, oh, that's where that comes from. Oh, I've heard it was French, but I didn't know that was sort of the story. Then I want to preserve that history too. And at some level, I don't know if the first time you walk in the door, I need to tell you who the founders of parkour were and where it came from and all that stuff. But at some point in your parkour journey, I hope you take the level of interest in it to understand the origin story. Because it's just important to know where stuff comes from.
It's true, and we want to pay respect to it, and I've always been of the opinion that change is change, and you can try and fight it all you'd like, but it's gonna happen. So you might as well just roll with the punches and smile and live the best, happiest life that you can, and not get caught up on those things. But I do want to pay respect to the history of parkour and freerunning, but I think it's kind of a losing game if we take it so seriously, where we're like, free running is its own separate thing, parkour is its own separate thing. If anything, I really feel like the key term is parkour and free running is a subset. And if you want to define yourself as a free runner, you can, but keep in mind that you also do parkour.
Right.
You can separate, if we really wanted to, you can separate parkour from free running, but you cannot separate free running from parkour.
It's true.
And by that means that we all do parkour. We're all one big parkour happy family.
Right.
And just because you like to wear black clothes instead of neons doesn't mean you're not part of the family.
Why can't we have both? Outrun.
Right? So like
Exactly.
that's really what I would love to see, is that like free runners are like, no, I am a free runner, and when someone's like, do you do parkour? They answer yes.
They do.
And I think most of them do, right? Like I don't think there's any, top free runner now that would be like, no, I don't do parkour, I do free running. Maybe there is.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, parkour, let's all unite under the banner of parkour,
Mhm.
and there's no reason that you can't have your own state in the nation of parkour.
Right, but it is the state of free running.
Yeah, or the state of, like, trickers are gonna, I may burn for this one.
Oh God,
don't
no,
do
we
it,
haven't
don't do
brought
it.
the T word yet, don't do it!
I think that tricking falls under the parkour banner to a degree. I think if we were to Venn diagram them, they fall very, very closely, because tricking falls very closely under the free running banner. And I know, again, I'm not trying to diminish anybody's identity or anybody's feelings of their sport, right? But somebody can do artistic, version of this sport. Somebody can do the more serious version of this sport, and they're still the same sport.
Yeah, I think that I want to call out, if not just for the opportunity to be historically documented saying this and being right, is that I think eventually you will see free running absorb tricking, and people are like, no, there's no way.
Oh man, you guys are saying some
This
heretical
is some
stuff.
Maybe we
heresy.
We should start with saying that triggers, free runners, parkour, movement athletes, we love all of you, and we love everything that you do.
Yeah.
And like when I watch like a tricking clip, I'm still like,
How?
huh? And then let me watch that again, and if that clip's not in slow-mo, it actually angers me as a non-tricking person, because I'm like, I can't see what's happening.
Right.
And that's incredible to me, and I love that, and I don't want to diminish anybody's thing. But
Right.
sorry, with that being said,
But also let me throw something in there too, so people just don't think this is a parkour guy barking about tricking. Is that wushu, like tricking's origins are in wushu, and they're in sport karate,
Yep.
and then they're in arguably some acrobatics. You could say maybe tumbling and gymnastics had an influence too. I think they definitely drew from some of that stuff. But these are similar origins. We can understand that we have these similar origins in that. This is another reason why I think tricking is baked into this, but just has not quite been folded in yet. And that is because the origins have the same story. People were watching heroes, whether those are comic book heroes, those are martial arts heroes. They were inspired by those people. They were inspired by Hong Kong cinema. And then they took martial arts and they threw in aesthetics for performance. And this follows a very similar track around a very similar timeline to the free running evolution of parkour, right?
Yep.
So we could I would even give it the free running respect of saying it's an evolution of parkour, right? And so in a direction, in a focus, right?
Yeah.
And so tricking came from XMA. It came in its early people were doing martial arts and then added in sort of like the free running nature to their discipline, right? And we were doing that in wushu. When I pursued wushu because I was aesthetically interested in what was happening. And wushu primarily, even though it's a governing term, right? So we see the same thing happen with wushu and the term kung fu as you do as parkour and free running. The word kung fu, it means gong fu, which literally translates to hard work and skill over time, right? People doing hard work and skill over time. So that's why you can say, in parkour, we would say, you might see something and be like, oh, that guy's got pretty good parkour, and you're just using it sort of as an adjective, right? In that manner. You can say that with kung fu. Oh, his kung fu is pretty good, right? Even though he's not doing kung fu, like fighting like you would imagine it. But you can't say that about wushu. Wushu is martial arts, and wushu just in Chinese means martial arts. But kung fu is like another term that's interchangeably used. So it's a very similar argument and story, and all the tricking stuff comes from martial arts. People cannot deny that origin comes from Asian martial arts and then evolved from there. And we added in that sort of spice of modernity, right? Like that modern approach to things and the way to express ourselves. And it's new and it comes from that place that's shared across the disciplines, that folds them in together. So we're much closer related than I think people think, and that's why I think the other things environmentally, I got to say it before we go. That's it. That's where we go. Is that we all shared we all shared the strife and struggle of not having a place that we belonged.
Oh yeah.
For the longest time.
Yep.
Like, you were always... The irony is that gymnastics schools birthed parkour gyms.
Yep.
We would go in, and that was the same for me. I had a wushu school that sublet from a gymnastics school in Iowa, and I still have a very close relationship with those guys. It was Twisters Gymnastics in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and they were cool enough to let us come in and train. But then, even then, people started coming into the open gyms and doing parkour in the open gyms, and they stopped because they were concerned about liability. Unbeknownst to them, this stuff would grow, and then all of us felt that way. Trickers, whether freerunner person or parkour person, and a lot of like alternative or just like, you know, martial arts people didn't have a place to train in that way. Mm-hmm. And we had to beg off gymnastic schools or gymnasiums, and we were always treated like second-class movement citizens and just didn't have a place. Now, we, like, under pretty much the umbrella of parkour, have been able to have gyms emerge in a very authentic way, scrappy from the ground up. Our gym has always been a gym that once we, staked ourselves, our position in the ground was just parkour and anything related, right? So that's why you got a little bit of free running and tricking just baked into that. We were always that way. We didn't teach other programs, not because we didn't like them, but we wanted that to be the focus and to have an authentic home for it, not a movement buffet, but a parkour movement boutique, right? Like that was the vision early on. And so we don't have 20 dozen programs. There's nothing wrong with having that, but that's just, I want to acknowledge that that's rare. And when you talk to people that have scaled a gym just on parkour, there's not a ninja program, there's not...
I was going to say, as a business consultant, I would advise you against doing the movement buffet. It's always easier to market a niche, but we're not talking about business consulting.
Right, as a business consultant, yeah, exactly. Like, I think that's tough, but... Maybe another topic, but what I want to say is special about Outrun, and a lot of other parkour gyms out there are like this too, is that we went from 0 to 60 on parkour, and that's why it's special to some degree, in that other disciplines that do come in and do some training with us, like people do work on tricking and they do work on a free running emphasis or a speed emphasis or a skill emphasis, that our place, our home, is not a subset of something else, and I think that's very rare.
Yeah.
Anybody have any last words?
Kudos to anybody else who's done that too, by the way. If you are sitting out there and you're like, yo, no, we did that. We were just, really strictly parkour and we made it happen. Cool. That's rare. That's rare.
Yeah, hit us up, actually. We'd love to talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Any last words on the age-old topic of parkour v. free running? Or rather, the people versus free running?
The people versus free running.
I'm ready for it to die.
Seriously. The debate?
It is
the
kind
debate.
of...
The debate. Okay, let's be clear. Let's the debate.
Wow,
yeah, he's saying the debate.
Free running will always stay around. The debate for it. Debate for it's useless.
It just...
Waste time.
I gotta ask, hit me up directly, but free runners, do you find free running to be that exciting of a term? It seems like it's didn't we have in the early days of parkour so many look, I'm free walking and I'm sport jumping and I'm that's free running. It's just I don't know. I think it's cool. Obviously, I do free running.
Yeah.
But really, I do parkour.
Yeah.
Parkour is just such a unique term.
I think it
can't make sense.
Not to not end this conversation, but I think it really does help delineate where your focus is. If your focus is on the aesthetic.
But can't you just be I do parkour, but I'm focused on the style aspect of it, the more expressive side?
It's a lot of words. Ooh.
There's a lot of words, but...
It's true.
You like to explain what free running is.
So that I can be historically accurate in the future again, this is my premonition, is that versus the other direction, even though that may be more desired. What?
Premonition would involve that you've seen the future.
I have seen the future.
Oh, okay, in that case it's a premonition.
Okay, yeah, I've seen it. And is that we'll see further delineation. I predict that in the future you will have parkour as the global term, and then you'll have categories underneath, and you'll have free running, and you'll have chase tag or tag will be in there. You will have speed, which is gonna hold, and I don't know, there may be a new name for what emerges from skill. That may be the last one to sort of have global traction, but within the parkour community itself, I think it's very highly valued, and skill may be valued above all of those, at least at some level of respect anyway. But as far as a spectator element of the sport that gets categorized, I think it'll probably be the last one. And I don't know if it'll be renamed or not, but I think you may see something like how we saw World Chase Tag emerge to represent the tag element of it as a niche. You may see another thing emerge with a different name that may embody skill. But until that day, I mean, that's where I think we're looking at least those 4 categories in 2025-ish or something like that.
Yeah, Parkour will have events. Absolutely. Just like skiing and everything else has subsets that are events that you get highly specialized in.
Yep.
There's really no other way.
It's true.
Is there a 5th?
I'm sure there's going to be far more. I mean, parkour
Give me your
is
best
so
5th,
broad.
Justin. I haven't heard enough from you from this podcast. Let's hear your beautiful mind and what it comes up with. What's the 5th element?
I could see a sense being a special category. A sense of decence.
Kind of like buildering almost?
Yeah.
Oh, like parkour version of building. I like that.
And that could get a different name too. Oh, I like it. See? That was worth it. All right, we're going to end on that level of creativity. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I like it.
All right. The 5th element. Parkour, the 5th element.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
And we will catch you next time.
Next episode.
Be gentle on those comments.
Don't be gentle on Justin's comments.
Just know that we love everybody. We love movement. We're here for movement, so if we upset you, know that we love what you do.
Know that we've been upset too.
It's true. And we didn't mean to insult you.
Yeah, there's no insults. We're all good.